Okay, hello, welcome to Deeper Than Dogma. Tonight we are going to be talking about torture, and is torture ever compatible with morality? Um, when, like I put in the description for this video, and I was kind of a little bit tongue-in-cheek when I was kind of describing the conversations that you seem to have, the people seem to have often in the whole Google Plus Great Debate community type thing, is that you don't find a lot of people that advocate for torture. No rational, reasonable person would encourage the torturing of another individual. But when it comes to concepts like eternal damnation and hell, people seem all too willing to condone it or even praise the thought of somebody being tortured for all eternity. Um, is this somebody that's holding contradictory positions? Is this just hypocritical? We're going to hopefully kind of attack some of those issues or questions tonight. So for the show tonight, as this is one of Floyd's suggestions, he wants to open up with just a quick little presentation. He's just going to give some examples of torture and acts of violence as according to the Bible. So we're going to start this off with Floyd, and feel free to take it away.
Okay, thanks, Saka. Let me pull up my slide here. Can you see that okay?
Yeah, looks good.
I see it.
All right, great. Whoops, wrong. Let me start at the beginning. That might help. All right, there we go. All right, so what is torture? According to Wikipedia, torture is the act of deliberately inflicting severe physical or psychological pain and possibly injury to an organism, usually to one who is physically restrained or otherwise under the torturer's control or custody and unable to defend what is done to him or her. So again, it's physical or psychological pain against that person's own control. So in this presentation, I'm just going to talk about the Bible God and how he tortures people. The first example of the Bible God torturing people starts with the very first humans. In Genesis 3, with the fall, God basically tortures Eve and all women in childbirth. Because of Eve's disobedience to God, God says that he will multiply women's pain in childbearing. He says, in pain you shall bring forth children. So any woman who has given birth, I think, would definitely recognize this and agree with this, that childbirth can be very painful and seem torture. Here, this God has actually done this. Another example is the story of Job. God, through Satan, tortures Job. Job is considered to be a righteous person, yet God, through Satan, tortures God to a point where Job doesn't even wish he was born. He basically loses everything, his health, his family, his possessions, everything. So that's an example of torture. Another torture is way God uses torture is for redemption. He tortures Jesus. He brings Jesus in the world to be tortured. According to Hebrews 9, actually said, without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness of sins. So torture is actually used as a form for redemption. Torture is used for correction. For example, in Proverbs, we read that you should beat your children with a rod to discipline them. So torture can be used as a form of correction. Torture for vengeance. Torture can be used to vengeance. For example, in Deuteronomy, Yahweh brings up what the Amalekites did to the Israelites when they left Egypt 500 years before. Because of what they did in the past, Yahweh commands them to basically wipe out the Amalekites. So this is torture for vengeance. Torture for gain, for personal gain. Yahweh tells the Israelites to go into foreign lands and kill them, but spare the virgins for themselves. So they're going to inflict this punishment, but for their own gain, they get the gain of having these virgins. The Bible, God also threatens people with torture. For example, in Deuteronomy, he says, if you don't follow his laws, he will punish the offspring. It says, your offspring, you and your offspring, I will bring on you and your offspring extraordinary afflictions severe and lasting, sickness, grievous and lasting. And again, God takes delight in this torture. He says, so the Lord will take delight bringing ruin upon you and destroying you. So God actually delights in doing this. Again, more threats. And in this case, it's actually not a threat. It's actually something that God did. He said that he brought statutes where to make them offer by fire all their firstborn, that it might horrify them. So this is psychological torture. I did it that they might know that I am the Lord. This is actually he actually had a statute where the Jewish people should actually sacrifice their firstborn son. And in Jeremiah, he threatens that he will make them eat the flesh of their own sons and daughters, and everyone shall eat the flesh of his neighbor in the season and distress. So I would think eating your own children would be considered torture. Then we move on to later times. In the Old Testament times, there was this torture in the present age. In the New Testament, they have torture everlasting and in the afterlife. We see that in Daniel, which is around 2nd century BCE. It says that at the resurrection, those who are righteous will have everlasting life, but others will be resurrected to disgrace and everlasting contempt. And in Revelation, for example, it talks about those who worship, who are against God, who worship Satan, basically. They will be tormented with fire and sulfur. And the smoke of their torment goes on forever and ever. And they will have no rest day or night. So this is an everlasting torture that non-Christians will face. Images of hell by Jesus in the gospel. Jesus says hell will be an everlasting punishment. That'll be eternal destruction. There'll be banishment into darkness. And imageries of fire are used. Again, in the Christian hell, Jesus talks about people will be thrown into a furnace of fire where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So that's a sort of torture that will be going on in the Christian hell. And God creates hell for not for the devil and his angels, but also for humans. Again, it's described as an eternal fire, which will be thrown into. And he says it's better to lose your feet, it's better to lose an eye and so forth than to be or your hands rather than to be thrown into this fire of hell. So again, torture is being used as persuasion here. You better behave or you're going to be tortured. In Luke 16, for example, actually describes what torture is like. It describes a rich man. It says, in hell he lifted up his eyes, being in torments, and sees Abraham afar and Lazarus in his bosom. And he cried, said, Father Abraham, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus, that he may dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am tormented in this flame. So this is what this person is experiencing in hell. And this is what certain Christian groups teach about hell. For example, Calvinists in the Westminster Confession of Faith, it actually says, and of his judgment in damnation of the reprobate who is wicked and disobedient. It goes on to say, for the wicked who know not of God and obey not the gospel of Jesus shall be cast into eternal torments and be punished without ever and be punished with everlasting destruction from the presence of the Lord. This is from the Westminster Confession of Faith, which is a standard faith among Calvinists. And where does this come from? This actually comes from the Bible in 2 Thessalonians. It actually says this: inflicting vengeance upon those who do not know God and upon those who do not obey the gospel of the Lord Jesus. They shall suffer the punishment of eternal destruction and exclusion of the presence of the Lord and from the glory of his might. So this is coming directly from the Bible. Some Christians view hell as justice. So they view the punishment of hell is a just punishment for people, and this is seen in by the Calvinist theologian Jonathan Edwards. He says, quote, "Can the believing husband in heaven be happy with his unbelieving wife in hell? Can the believing father in heaven be happy with his unbelieving children in hell? Can the loving wife in heaven be happy with the unbelieving husband in hell? I tell you, yeah. Such will be the sense of justice that will be increased rather diminished their bliss." And Jonathan Edwards goes on and says, the sight of hell's torment will exalt the happiness of the saints forever. Excuse me one moment. Sorry about that. I'll start again.
We'll edit that part out.
Okay. The sights of hell torments with exalt the happiness of the saints forever. And it will really make their happiness the greater, and it will make them more sensible of their own happiness. So Jonathan Edwards is here saying, for Christians, it will actually make them happy knowing that sinners are being tormented in hell. It will increase their happiness. So that is my presentation. So thank you for.
Well, thank you very much for it. So I guess to start off, Maximus, why will you be happy that people are being tortured?
I can answer
you can respond to anything.
No. That's actually the one I'd first go with. Well, it's kind of like being assimilated into the Borg, I suppose. My will be God's will. So, and my will be happy that God's will is done. That's usually the kind of response the person giving that kind of argument would provide. Excuse me. Sorry, I had to belch off microphone. Now, in any case, Jonathan Edwards isn't really the first theologian to mention something like this. It was mentioned in the works of Aquinas and the Summa Theologia. In fact, Floyd, if you want to get far better material on hell, discuss Thomas Aquinas over Jonathan Edwards any day of the week. But that aside, that's generally the reason. So because justice and God's justice has to be done, of course, the will of man, the will of the righteous will placate to the will of God and be happy that God's will is done. Because in heaven we'll be fully within the presence of God in the beatific vision.
Yeah, well, you can read Dante's Inferno about hell, but people say, well, that's just a later description of hell. But if you want to read an earlier description of hell, there's a Christian writing. It's non-canonical.
I think it's the Apocalypse of Peter. That one.
Yeah, exactly. The Apocalypse of Peter. Blasphemers are hung up by their tongues in hell. Adulterous women are hung up by their hair, and adulterous men are hung up by, guess what?
I'm guessing it's their penises.
Their hair?
Which hair? But yeah, oh yeah, a lot of the apocalypses were inspired under Christian persecution. So let's remember that one.
Yeah, and Apocalypse of Peter, that's second century.
Yeah. Although there has to be something that has to be sorted out because a lot of these verses use the term torment instead of torture. And here's the distinction. Torment is something that's completely mental and towards you. So while all instances of torture involve torment, not all instances of torment require torture. So, for example, I could steal an old woman's purse, and then let's say someone gives me a really good reason why I'm scummy for doing that. Maybe it forced the old woman to die of a heart attack, being scared. In any case, I'd suffer many sleepless, agonizing nights. I'd be filled with torment because of it. Nobody tortured me. Nobody provided kind of an argument. The argument itself, I don't think anyone would say, "Oh, you put someone through torture because of it." No, you heard an argument, then you felt tormented for it because of what you've done. That's something that is an instance of torment without torture. So what hell is by its nature need not necessarily be torturous, as long as it just could have torment.
I understand what you're saying. I think it's kind of dodging the entire issue. That I don't think that.
Remember, the issue tonight is whether or not instances of torture are correct. Not putting somebody through torment, because again, we would have to state that in my scenario, if I was to give a rational argument towards this person why he should feel scummy for stealing an old woman's purse, and then I think that person was tormented, but I shouldn't suffer any more responsibility.
Yeah, but torture is physical.
Can you tell me?
Exactly. I agree. But my main point is, but again, my main point is torment isn't torture. That's all.
I know they can both be physical, though. It sounds like you're making a distinction without a difference.
Yeah, I think torment is psychological torture. I mean, I don't really see the difference.
So just to get the
torture is just inflicting the pain. Torment is
going through
physical or mental, the suffering from the pain.
Yeah. So would you argue that in that situation, my syllogism or my argument for why that person should feel scummy, and that resulting in him feeling many sleepless nights of torment was a form of torture? I don't think it was. I think it was just me giving a reason why you should feel scummy, and his reaction was his alone.
But torture, hold on real quick. But torture itself is just inflicting pain. It doesn't say whether it's mental or physical either. I mean, it can be mental or physical for torture to be just inflicting the pain in there.
So everyone here is agreed that me giving an argument why someone should feel bad, if it results in them being tormented, is my fault.
Well,
I'd actually like to hear everyone's opinion on this before moving on, because it would be nice to touch on this. At least
sure.
now.
Okay. Ask it one more time.
Okay. So is me giving an argument to somebody that results in them feeling tormented an instance of torture?
Well, if the source of the torment is external from another person, that person. If I say to you, for example, Max, your parents just died in a fiery car crash, and you mourn and you're upset and so forth, and it's a complete lie.
Well, that's deception. So that
I call it torment. It's a form of psychological torture. I did something to you.
All right. So are you saying if we went to court and there was a police officer who said something, maybe did something along the lines that I did, gave a rational argument why someone should feel bad, would you state that cop should be tried for torture?
Well, I mean, he's just stating objective fact, right?
Yeah, he's stating objective facts, and that objective fact resulted in someone feeling tormented. Should that cop?
You're missing though that torture.
Should that cop be judged
as a punishment?
Should that
Here,
cop?
Let me read out the definition part. I know, but you're skipping over that part of it.
But I'm saying you apply this in a court ruling.
No, because it's not a punishment. That's what I'm saying. Torture is the act or this is what I'm reading. The action or practice of inflicting severe pain on someone as a punishment, or to force them to do or say something, or for the pleasure of the person inflicting the pain.
Okay. So the cop could clearly be avoiding those and just stating objective facts about why that person should feel bad. Is that still a form of torture?
Well, it might seem torturous.
Yeah, but would you go to a courtroom and say this person is guilty of torture? Because we have to be consistent here above all else.
Well, I mean, in that case, I mean, that the person under trial has made other people suffer.
Yeah, technically, I would say I would go to a courtroom for that. The court's going to throw it out because it's going to be trivial to them, but it's still going to fall under that. I don't know why it wouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, in that case, it's necessary too. It's necessary. It's like harm is done. We need to put an end to this. If that person feels bad about it, well, it's necessary. There's good reasons for it. So
right. So I think already starting off this hangout, we at least have one justified reason for torture under this definition we're all going with.
What? Sorry, I thought we had a justified reason for torment.
Oh, a justified. Oh, but I thought I was going through this asking if it was considered torture.
Okay, but there's a lot of scripture. There's a lot of things there's a lot of things that we pointed out there. I mean,
but I just don't want to leave this point until we're in agreement. There's a form of torture that is justified, or that this is just a form of torment, and under some circumstances, torment can be divorced from torture.
I missed how it was justified.
You said it was justified.
I didn't say it was justified.
So you don't think that the jury should throw out that case for being trivial?
I think we're kind of going around in circles here for a second.
I see what Max is getting at. He's saying
I'm saying that the court throw it out, saying that's going to waste their time.
Like if you bring up something that's going to make the person feel bad,
mm-hmm.
If I bring up like the time your puppy got run over by a car, that's going to make you feel bad. Is that torture? Well,
if it resulted in torment.
Okay, right. I'm gonna. Shanna, you wanted to add something in here.
Yeah. I think that there's a distinction that's being overlooked here. That we're talking about causal responsibilities and moral responsibilities,
mm-hmm.
right? If the police officer says something or does something, or I do something, I'm a jackass to somebody and I upset them and I torment them or I torture them in some way, I'm causally responsible, but does it then follow that I'm morally responsible? That's something that we could discuss. But I think that what Floyd was trying to get at, and I think the distinction that Epi or Max now.
I'm Max now.
You're Max now.
Maximus, but either
Maximus. Or. Do you prefer Max, Maximus? What do you want?
I prefer Maximus, but if Max is good with you, then I'm not going to judge or harp on you.
He's not going to torture you about it.
He's not going to torture me about it. I'll live through it.
Yeah.
Torment him, call him Epi.
Yeah.
Shut up, Brother John.
That's who he is. I didn't get the fucking memo, so.
I have so much clout on me. I thought everyone would know.
I think that they're trying to say, the distinction they're trying to say is God morally responsible? Can he be held morally responsible and morally accountable for the endless torturing of human souls?
Mm-hmm. All right. No, it makes sense, but I just want to draw a distinction between torment and torture, just so everyone's aware, and that not all instances of torment are a result from torture, at least in the morally responsible sense.
Well, I mean, if you're going to talk about like is torture being compatible with morality, which morality?
That's true. So, are we all going to discuss our various moral viewpoints?
No, we don't have that kind of time.
Okay.
Yeah. I think there's a difference between just saying a fact which upsets the person, and then actually causing physical pain or emotional pain as just a form of punishment and so forth. I mean, just to say, hey, if someone did something wrong and they're very ashamed of it, and you bring it up and they're tormented by that, well, the person who did the shameful act is responsible for doing that act.
Mm-hmm.
But the person bringing it up, if the cop brings it up, he's not doing it to torment the person. He's not doing it to torture the person. He's doing it to get brings the facts up.
That's where you make that distinction between a causal and a moral responsibility.
So I think
I think
it's the intent. The intent is different.
Mm-hmm. So I think God. All right. So that the distinction I would make is, while God is causally responsible, I don't think He's morally responsible. Is that fair enough?
I think that's what you're trying to argue.
Yeah, that's what you're trying to argue, but I don't see that at all. Your God, as I did in my presentation, your God is torturing people for vengeance, for redemption, for persuasion, for punishment, all those things.
And because it gives him glory.
Yeah.
According to apologists
for
Matt
for
Slick.
personal gain as well.
All right. So I'll start off with maybe. Okay, so maybe I'll start off with redemption. In fact, I'll start off things by saying, or repeating a line that R.C. Sproul once said that I really like. There's a saying, "Why do bad things happen to good people?" I just like to point out that's only happened once, and he volunteered. So I'll start off there. I think in terms of all cases of torture, whether all cases of torture are justified, I think that I could excuse torture under certain circumstances, and I think in terms of what does society have I think we have to look at it from various levels. There's the individual level, there's the societal level, and of course there is the divine level. So in terms of the individual level, there are many things that we're willing to grant society as a whole that we would not grant to the individual, him or herself. So for example, in terms of collecting taxpayer money, I think that the government doing that is just fine. However, when an individual goes around doing it, that's stealing. Not to mention, there are situations like this that the government does have moral access and responsibility to resources that the individual doesn't. It's in terms of things happening on the divine level, God being the moral agent in charge of the universe, has access, also having powers of being all-knowing, and of course being all-powerful, and also being the highest moral agent within the universe, has epistemic access to things that we don't even have. So I think even on that level, there is a new set of responsibility going on here. Even amongst individuals, we have roles that we allow that parents have that children don't. In a case with individuals, for example, if I was to tell my kid to go to bed at 9 p.m., that's for my child. That's to give. However, if it comes to myself, deciding when I want to sleep, I think that extending my bedtime to 12 o'clock or even deciding whether or not sleep is necessary is my right to decide as an adult. So we all delegate moral responsibilities on one level to another. Furthermore, in terms of hell and that sort of thing, God also has every right to. I would recognize that God, while tormenting sinners, is done in a causal sense, not a morally responsible sense. So, for example, if God were to decide, if God were to separate himself from his creation. So, for example, eternal separation from God, and that results in individuals being tormented for eternity. God doesn't have any moral responsibility for that. Causal responsibility, certainly, but not moral responsibility.
But he knows what he's doing, though. I mean,
sorry, one second there, Floyd. But what happens if that's not torment? What happens if, for example,
if it's not torment, you're going to have to give me an argument.
Well, no.
Well,
what I mean is it's not torment, because what happens if I don't care about being separated from God?
Okay.
That if you're saying that that the torment that let's say on a hypothetical that God is real, I die, I go to hell. I'm going there because my lack of belief. I'm not going there because I was a terrible person. I'm not going there because I raped, murdered, or stole. I'm there due to a lack of belief.
No, you're not. No, you're there for being unregenerate. Having a lack of belief, it might be a sign that you're unregenerate.
Okay. So why am I there?
Because you're a bad person.
Yeah.
You're born a bad person.
Okay, so I was born a bad person. Why would I? If I didn't accept God here on the mortal plane, why would I care about wanting His acceptance in the afterlife? Why would that be tormentful for me?
Two things. First of all, in terms of all of us being born quote unquote bad, that it's not that case. We have a disposition to being bad, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we are going to be bad. Second of all, in terms of all of us going to in terms of being an adult and being able to reflect on your actions, on any minuscule action, especially in light of the eternal glory of God, that's going to cause torment. In the same way, I would propose that one would feel terrible for stealing the purse of an old lady.
I mean, you'd have to give an argument for that. Somebody that's rejected God their entire life, why would all of a sudden why would they have a turnaround all of a sudden afterwards?
Okay, so this goes to the definition of God. I don't believe in a so I don't really believe in a small God who is one being among many beings, who is like, consider me, you, pets, animals, plants. We're all one type of being or another. God isn't one kind of being. He isn't just us, but with superpowers. But rather, God is ipse unum in the Latin, meaning the ground of all being or the ground of all existence. Therefore,
What does that mean?
The ground of so
is God a person or not? Does he think? Does he act? Does he have thoughts?
Okay, so
he's a person, right? Or in the case of Christian guy, he's three persons, right?
So the term
he's conscious, he's sentient, he has thoughts, he makes plans.
So in terms of so this goes to the theological language. In terms of predicating God with certain qualities. So for example, you listed a bunch: conscious, plans, that kind of thing. First of all, we're dealing with a very unique instance of a person. Second of all, in terms of what God is, whenever we predicate something to God, we're doing it by what's known as analogy. In terms of analogy, we're taking something that is us or applies to us, or can we properly predicate it to us, but we're applying it in the loosest sense to a transcendent entity. And we're doing that by analogy. God, I would say that God is conscious or God is personal, but in a greater sense than we are, or in a sense that doesn't involve the way we act, in the way we instantiate those properties.
You're saying what's not okay. In what sense then? Is he conscious or not?
He's conscious in a much greater sense than we are.
In a much greater sense. What does that mean?
In a much greater sense.
Yeah.
In a sense that isn't bounded by being a material or temporal entity.
Okay, but he has consciousness.
Yes.
It doesn't matter what's causing the consciousness.
It's not the same instant as it is in us. So, for example, let's take the consciousness of a rabbit and our own consciousness.
Right.
We have consciousness that could express itself rationally. However, when it comes to rabbits, they have a form of consciousness too, but they don't instantiate it in a rational sense. In terms of this, we go to the Aristotelian principle of proportionate causality. So whatever exists in the cause exists in a greater sense within the effect. So because God is the cause of humans, who are the highest among all beings, then whatever is within humanity and that isn't within the creation must be in God Himself. Because we don't see immaterial minds within creation other than ourselves, then we'd have to go with God on this one.
Yeah, so he's more conscious, he's more aware, he's more aware of our suffering and so forth. So again, so he's more of a person. He's more conscious. He's more aware.
He's all
He has more knowledge. So he's more aware of all the suffering that's taking place.
Oh yeah, and he still has a need to exactly, and he still has a need to actualize the state of affair. So, but with regards to it being torturous, to get back on point here, how God doesn't remember. I'm bringing this up for this reason, because humans reject God, who is, and to add that, more good than us as well, because we stand in the face of God, who represents things such as who is fully just, merciful, all those other good qualities, and to know what we did makes us feel all the more terrible for transcending against that. I usually give this example. Imagine being in the presence of the Platonic form of justice. So Platonism, for example, kind of has this concept more or less. If I was to experience or to pontificate upon what justice is, knowing exactly the unjust things I've done, I'd feel far more worse than myself, especially if that thing was infinitely just. I would feel all the more worse. So that's all that humans go through. When they're unregenerate and when they pontificate upon all the wrongs that they have done, that's what they're reflecting on, and that's what they suffer.
Okay, I want to kind of get this back on track here for a second. I'm gonna throw this over to Benny.
By the way, I just want to say I was on track because you were asking, well, you're gonna have to give an argument with regard to why is it like that for God. So that's all I was answering.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Benny, you wanted to jump in here.
Sure. Well, there was the only way I've ever heard torture justified, and I missed the beginning, so if I missed this, then I apologize. But is using some form of consequentialist argument, saying that the ends justify the means, something like U.S. Or something like Jack Bauer in 24, or U.S. CIA operatives overseas. They say, well, we didn't want to do it, but in the end, it justifies the means because save American lives. In the case of hell, there doesn't seem to be a greater good being served. So I mean, I would wonder what the means are if this torture is serving a greater purpose, if there is some purpose.
So the greater purpose is this. In terms of how it glorifies God, God has two properties: being infinitely just, or being perfectly just, and being perfectly merciful. Now, in terms of what the beatific vision is, or the very concept of heaven is, that is being in the presence of God fully realized for human beings, where it could be expressed to us on that level. With regards to knowledge of God, we can say that we as Christians can say we have it in terms of it being, on the one hand, revealed to us in terms of special revelation, or we can say that God's existence is provable using natural revelation. But in terms of that, we only understand that abstractly. However, to understand God in the empirical sense, or in the sense of being in God's eternal presence, that requires, of course, would require humans being in heaven, the elect being within heaven, and of course, God.
You're losing me. You're losing me, Epi. I'm sorry. I don't.
All right. So God is fully just, fully merciful. God shows off His mercy by giving salvation onto the elect.
You can't be fully just and fully merciful. To be fully merciful, to be fully merciful would be to forgive everyone. That would be full mercy. I mean, so when you say He's fully just and fully merciful, this is not even a possible.
How is internal torture fully just? How is torturing people forever justice?
All right, two levels of questions, but I'll answer them in the order that they were given. So, Benny, the first, I would respond to you by suggesting that being just means giving somebody what is due to them, and being merciful is giving somebody more than what is due to them. So, just to use an analogy, if somebody was to owe me $50, then being just would just mean taking back the $50. However, if I was being merciful, what I would do is, as soon as they offered to pay me back the money, I would just give it right back to them. being.
And he doesn't do that with the damned, right? He's not merciful to the damned.
He is not merciful. No, he is not merciful to those that reject him. He is not merciful to those who reject him. He gives them justice, but justice doesn't contradict mercy, and mercy doesn't contradict justice. There is no
We're getting a
there's
little
no
bit.
problem. There's no problem of overlap here. And with regards to exercising justice to those who are in hell, justice means, of course, giving somebody what is due onto them. If those in hell are given their just punishment, then of course that's what's due to them. That's all there is to it.
If God is perfectly merciful, could he be any more merciful than he is?
No.
And
Okay, so I mean, but wait.
Ask a question real quick, because on his
Sorry,
go
who's
ahead,
next?
go ahead, Benny. Go ahead.
If he forgave just one extra person, right? I mean, he's the one making the judgment call. He's the one saying, well, this person okay, this person no. Mm-hmm. If he forgave just one more person, wouldn't he then be more merciful than he is now?
Okay, so he would express his justice and mercy to humans on the perfect level. So of course, those who he has decided to save, those are the people who will experience it. And of course, those who he's decided not to, they will. It doesn't subtract from his mercy.
But what purpose is the torture serving? That was my original question, and then we have other people that.
The purpose that
the
purpose that the torment, and I'm going to stress that the purpose of the torment is so that the saved may know that he is fully just as well.
Whoa. Okay. So I mean, so the people in heaven need to know that God is just, and so they get something out of the suffering, the infinite suffering.
Experience.
Sorry, what? They get to experience that he's just, so they get something positive out of the eternal suffering of most of humanity. So I mean, the small minority of people that will be saved, according to the Bible, it's just a slim portion of people. Narrow is the road, and few find it. Wide is the path that leads to destruction. So most of humanity is doomed, but this small portion of humanity gets some benefit from knowing that the rest of us are suffering, and this is a just system, and this is a perfectly merciful God.
And the standard, you switch the standard. Before, the standard of going to hell was we're all bad because of our sin. Now the standard for going to hell is because we reject God. Those are two separate standards.
If you reject God, you are
if
bad.
The standard is that we're all bad people, everyone would be in hell, because according to Christian theology, everyone is bad. So it can't be that.
I actually said that you are there because you are unregenerate.
Right. So it has nothing to do with our sinful nature. Because if it was our sinful nature, we'd all be damned.
If it wasn't for our sinful nature, we'd all be damned. Well, if it was,
it's because of our sinful nature we'd all be damned. So it's not the criteria that we're bad sinful people.
It's because of our sinful nature in which we all deserve to be damned.
Sorry, I really want to hear Shannon on this. I promised her that she can say something a while back there, and people kind of jumping in. I like the free flow conversation, but when someone has a point, just put it in the sidebar here. But so Shannon, sorry, go ahead. Do you still have your point?
I don't know. I mean, I kind of feel bad for with Maximus.
Thank you.
I'm trying to find another.
I'll give my best shot. Because everybody's just kind of gang. I mean, obviously, I think your points are horrible, but
yeah, you try being my.
I don't know. I heard that you changed your views a little bit, though, but I guess not on this, huh?
No.
I mean, I don't understand. I don't understand how you literally have to think that God made human beings incompetent, incapable of detecting or recognizing morality when we see it. You have to think.
I believe he makes us competent enough to recognize when something is wrong and something is right. That's how.
Okay, so then,
that's how we're responsible
would
agents.
you ever promote? Or let's do little bits at a time. Okay, not go on these long rants. Okay, would you ever promote or encourage the kind of behavior towards other human beings that God does? Or do you think that might makes right? God can do it. It's okay. It's okay if God does it because we're His little playthings.
I think you're presenting a false dichotomy. I think that God.
I haven't
think
even
that-
presented a dichotomy.
Well, one is either I would. Okay, that's fair enough. My bad.
Okay.
So
Play nice.
okay, I thought the dichotomy was some. No,
It's fine. Go on.
all right, and maybe it was a loaded question. Maybe that's how I should have phrased my objection.
That's what you meant. Yeah, it's totally loaded, but you can handle that. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. So So I would recognize two things. The distinction between me and God is I'm not on His level in terms of arbitrating whether or not something is right or wrong in a particular circumstance, because He has far more epistemic access than I do. So, for example, your kid, we have children who can also recognize when something is right or wrong, but they fail in terms of, but they also have a failing in terms of maybe much more harder instances. So, for example, kids are more. If you present somebody this puzzle, is it right to steal a loaf of bread to feed a starving family? Now, a child would just say, "Oh no, that's wrong in all circumstances." However, there might be some exceptions here. Now, of course, this is stuff I'm remembering from my high school sociology class, so please, someone correct me if I'm wrong here. But my main point is children are not as good ethicists as maybe adults are. But at the same time, we recognize that they can be right about moral instruction, or when something is morally right or wrong to do. So likewise, I think God having a far greater epistemic access would also be in better access of determining when a specific event is justified or not than I would. So that would be probably the distinction I would make as compared to God issuing something.
So what does he know about hell that we don't?
Hold on, Floyd. So then God made us incompetent and incapable of detecting whether or not He's moral.
Oh no, I think that I could defend this on a rational basis.
Well, you just used children as the analogy, right? So that's the analogy that you're going with.
So are you
that we compare to God or children, and like children aren't capable of understanding the finer points of morality, right? Because like you and I agree on morality. Hold on, you and I agree on morality, right? We're both virtue ethicists. We both think that everything is always right in situation A, and everything's always right in situation B, and and its reverse is childlike morality, right? We both agree on that. Right?
So,
you're still virtue. Okay.
Correct.
So but you think that even at our height, even at with the capacity to reason and to examine these things more carefully, we're still incapable of recognizing that hell for eternity, for whatever reason you want to give it. I don't give a damn what reason it is. You guys can go back and forth about whether it's belief or it's being damned or being sinner. I don't give a shit. Eternal torture and damnation. You're saying that we're incapable of recognizing how that's moral and just.
Well, first of all, torment is what I'm arguing for. I still haven't been convinced it is a form of torture.
Well,
torment is just feeling bad about yourself. That's all. If that's what you're describing it.
Maybe it is just an eternity of feeling bad about yourself.
Well, okay. I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to jump in here on this one because you saw this in the the old demonstration or the PowerPoint that Floyd put up at the beginning. Is that when you take a look at the biblical text on the concepts of hell, you have like Revelation.
All references had torture in there, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, you had like Revelation 21. Revelation 21:8 here. But the cowardly, the unbelieving, the vile, the murderers, the sexually immoral, those who practice magic arts, the idolaters, and the all liars, their place will be in the fiery lake of burning sulfur. This is the second death.
God created hell.
I mean,
these people.
Yeah, Matthew 13:50, and throw them into the fiery furnace where there will weeping and gnashing of teeth. Mark 9:43. If your hand causes you to sin, cut it off. It is better for you to enter life maimed than with two hands to go to hell where the fire never goes out. These are all examples of an afterlife of torture, of a place of fire and brimstone and pain and suffering.
Can I clarify that point real quick?
This is not just about torment. This is not just about we're going to separate. We're going to separate you from God. We're going to make you feel bad about yourself because you're separated from God. The Bible paints a pretty clear picture that hell is a place of torment, of torture, of pain, of suffering. of fire, of gnashing of teeth, not just about feeling really bad for your actions on Earth.
And I thought we did clear those definitions up earlier. That torment was suffering and torture was pain. Those were the two distinct differences between them.
No, actually, I think we distinguish between causal and moral responsibility. I'm fully.
No, that was what we were asking.
No,
that wasn't.
I'm fully buying that God is causally responsible here. But
that wasn't the distinction we were making earlier between causal and moral. No, not in where torture and torment were.
That's the distinction that you guys should be making.
I was trying to clarify. I just looked this up a second ago, and torture, the noun, because there's a noun and a verb, but the noun is the action of practice of inflicting severe pain on someone as a punishment or to force them to do or say something. But that first portion, before the or, inflicting severe pain upon someone as a punishment is clearly what hell is. The verb of torture is inflict severe pain on. So, I mean, there's no way getting around that. And torture and torment have the same root word, I think, by the way.
They do have the same root word.
I mean, it's not like these are drastically different terms.
But
no, it feels like you're painting this
earlier. That one was pain and one was suffering. That's all I was trying to say.
Yeah, it feels like you're painting this picture of hell as the timeout corner where you sit and feel bad about the stuff that you did. That's not the image of hell that when you talk to most Christians that you get. That it's not just this little place, you sit in the corner and think about how bad of a person you are. It's a place where sit in the corner and be tortured for all eternity.
We separate.
Yeah, you're not learning anything
from God for eternity.
You're not going to be a better person because of it.
Right, separated from God in an eternal lake of fire.
So first of all,
if you don't get a chance to try again, then
how can
you be learning anything?
So first of all, if one reads the Revelations 14:10, that person will also drink of the wine of God's anger, and that has been mixed undiluted into the cup of wrath, and he will be. And of course, it speaks of actually, no, I picked the NET translation. So, and he will be tortured with fire and sulfur in front of the holy angels and in front of the Lamb. Okay, wow, stupid ENT. And even Floyd's translation had torments in it. I should have just had torments.
It's so bad.
But sulfur, it says God prepared this for the devils and his angels, and now he's also going to throw humans in it as well.
This is entirely semantic, by the way. We know that hell is torture. I mean, with this semantic point, we can just let go. Hell is a nasty place, right? Hell is a nasty, nasty place.
Hell is a nasty place. Okay, I'm not disagreeing that it isn't nasty. Another verse, which is better in context. Dealing out retribution to those who do not know God and to those who do not obey the gospel of our Lord Jesus, these will pay the penalty of eternal destruction, away from the presence of the Lord and from the glory of his power, when he will be glorified in his saints on that day, to be marveled at among all who believe, for our testimony to you was believed. So hell is also distinguished as eternal destruction, and furthermore, even Paul says it's an eternal darkness. So in terms of how darkness is compatible with fire, which is very bright, one of those verses, just saying, has to be far more. One of those examples has to be metaphor, and one has to be literal. I'm going to stake out it's going to be eternal darkness and destruction.
Wait, so you found one verse that says darkness, and there's more than a dozen verses that talk about eternal fire, and we're going to pick the darkness one?
The darkness one I could better justify. In terms of the
it fits better within the torment argument. I think
of course I'm going to go with the argument that best reflects my side.
Right. Okay. I understand your position, Max. Okay. I really
do. Honest here. Second of all, I just want to point out that the fire used was the image of Gehenna, which was a fireplace that was outside of Jerusalem. That's where the images come from. That's what Christ was using as the image of hell, because Gehenna was a place that was, it's a garbage dump, and no one wants to be burned alive in a garbage dump.
But it went out, right? I mean, there was a fire in the Gehenna, and it went out, and so I mean, the metaphor fails. I mean, there is no eternal fire there. What Christians believe now is that it just goes on and on forever.
Well, it's actually quite interesting. The word eternal in Greek actually doesn't mean forever. It just means for a really long time. It can be used in either circumstance, and Thomas Talbot actually points that out. Although the response to that is usually, well, the word eternal is also used for heaven as well in the New Testament. That's true, but heaven in the New Testament comes from the prophecy of Isaiah, and that's described as without end in the Hebrew, which literally does mean without end. However,
I grew up with a verse that says forever and ever.
Right.
and that's in Revelations.
Sorry, Max. The thing is, I guess the topic of this discussion has moved more a little bit off course, not in the sense of because what we're disagreeing with now is we're disagreeing with your theology. We're disagreeing with your interpretation of this. Is that if I was to get in a room with 10 theists, 10 Christians, your interpretation of hell and what it is probably going to be very unique to you. Most people
don't even believe it exists.
Just saying, if Aaron was here, he would also be on your side on this one. He's an annihilationist. So make that, if you will.
So there's this idea that and this is kind of going on with the topic, and I don't want to argue against a position that you don't hold. But for the sake of what we were discussing here, is that many theists do believe that hell is a place of eternal torture. Sorry, by fire. It's with the little devils poking you with the pitchforks and all that stuff for all eternity. That it's not a very pleasant place to go. It's a place where you are getting tortured. Now, I mean, you do a lot of stretching gymnastics with the scripture to get to a point where you talk about torment. You try to get the torture, the pain aspect out of it, and focus more on just this torment that you feel bad for your actions. But that's not what most Christians that I've interacted with here even believe. Those ones believe in the torture, and they believe in that torture being just. Which I think is which was kind of like the goal of that we're shooting for here, but I think we're arguing against a completely different theology here at this point in time.
Yeah, and Christians believe, like Jews who believe and love the same God supposedly, and that feel bad about their sin, they're going to be punished as well, simply because they have the incorrect theology, because they don't accept Jesus as the Son of God. They don't believe Jesus rose from the dead and is Lord. Those people are going to be punished too. Yet those people love this same God. They feel bad about their sin. They want to repent from their sin, but because they just don't believe in this Jesus resurrecting from the dead, those people as well will be tortured.
That depends on your theology. That's not widely the case. I mean, when I was a Christian, that's not what I was taught. There's
you
a
were
verse
taught that Jews would be saved?
I was taught that there's a verse that says that they've been blinded, they've been temporarily they're unable to see Jesus for what he is, and that they won't be held accountable for something that they're God's chosen people and they're special and they're blinded for whatever reason. And so most of the Christians I know don't think that all Jews are going to hell. So I don't know if that's normal or not, but it's not what I was taught.
Yeah, but John told her sons of the devil.
It's Catholics. Catholics are more anti-Jewish than Protestants, but I can't speak for
the John Gospel is very anti-Jewish.
So in terms of how it's used in Revelations, I just did a simple Google search. So there are various sources of the root words, but number 4 seems to have the most correspondence to other New Testament verses and applications. To torture there's only one instance, and that's in 2 Maccabees 7:13. So all things being equal, I would probably just go with the 4th one, considering it also has far more biblical support for it in terms of its application. So, yeah.
I have a question for you guys.
Okay.
For Ep016.
Ep016.
Yeah, Ep016. I guess, one, I think this conversation's gone way off track. That's just my view here. But 2, what do you think that you're going to, but for all of you, for the atheist and for the theist, what do you guys think that you're going to accomplish if you get your point home, right? Like if Epi, if the atheists say to you, okay, fine, he's not a monster, and then if Epi's like, okay, fine, you know what, he's a dick. I mean, personally, if I was a Christian, I would own it. I don't understand. I mean, literally, I haven't done this in months, and I feel like I've popped right back into the exact same conversation that you guys were having months ago.
So I'm actually willing to change my mind on this one. I actually see that there are good cases for universalism and even annihilationism. And of course, I'm sticking to the traditional interpretation, mostly because that has a prima facie defense of it, or a prima facie kind of precedent to go here. And I don't really see how it constitutes an immoral position either.
Sorry.
So you could be moved on the fate of the souls, but you couldn't be moved on the morale, on whether or not this God's moral. You think we're just flat not in a position to make that decision?
Well, I think you can make the position. So the argument, as far as I see it, is if any moral agent tortures, then that moral agent is immoral. God is a moral agent who tortures, therefore God is immoral. The premise that I'm disagreeing
there you go.
with, the premise that
That's a good argument.
So the premise here I'm disagreeing with is the second premise. I don't think God is inflicting torture by sending people to hell. What I think he's doing, on the other hand, is just allowing a state of torment to be exacted.
Oh, come on.
He created this
place. He created the whole system. He created hell. He created the whole system. He's completely responsible.
Yeah, I mean,
he's this all-powerful God.
He's the one that made it the case where that would be the consequence. I mean, he's the one that made it that way. Unless, of course, this is something God has no control over, but then there goes your all-powerful thing.
I could definitely say that this is... Well, one could argue that this is the best of all possible worlds, all else being equal. One could also... So that's one way of saying it. The second way of saying it is God gives mankind free will, or sufficient free will, to choose their eternal destiny. So that's another way.
You can't choose what you believe. He requires belief. You guys can split hairs all you want, but it's in there. It's clear. He requires belief.
Yeah, I don't choose to be tormented. I don't choose to be tortured. That's for sure.
No one would choose that. No rational person would choose an eternity of torture or torment.
Okay, so you're in the presence of God. You have a choice. You have the empirical evidence right there. There's really nothing that you could need more for. Would you go through with it? Would you say, okay, fine, I'll submit here. I think you're in the right. I was wrong.
No, in the presence of God, having those two options, I would pick the lesser of two evils and go with an eternity worshiping Him.
I would say whatever He wanted me to say to not be tortured.
It would be like if ISIS kidnaps me and says, you bow down and say, Allah Akbar, or we're going to kill you. What's your choice? I would say, Allah Akbar.
If somebody kidnaps me and takes me off to rape me, says, if you resist, I'll kill you. Well, I guess we're fucking, because I'm not. I mean, that's the kind of choice God's giving.
Yeah. So, worship me, or I'm going to torture you.
No. So first of all, God withholding His presence from you isn't a form of torture. That's Him not raping you. God can do one of two things. He can seduce you, or He could leave you be. And of course, if you're left on your own, then whatever happens to you happens to you.
Well,
the only thing that can happen to me is the exact thing that God set up when He set up the parameters of the universe and how things would work. That's the only thing that can happen to me.
But God can't do the logically impossible here. So
yeah, but would that make you more? Hold on. Would that goes back to a moral question of if I were to walk up past a rape, would I not be morally an agent there by not attempting to stop it or call someone else to help the situation? So God's leaving me in this situation to happen, knowing it's going to happen, and then just leaves me to it when He has the power to stop it.
Literally being the only one with the power to stop it. It would be like me watching a kid get hit by a bus. Well, yeah, they made their choice. I would be in prison.
Right.
So,
yeah. Well, hold on, Max.
Both these situations are different.
I know. I want to get. We have two other theists in the room. I'm going to.
Can I just say one more time? I made this argument earlier before, and I just want to rehash this point quickly one more time.
Mm-hmm.
Premise one: God is the ground of all being. Premise 2, if you are separate from the ground of all being, that results in eternal destruction. Therefore, those who reject God are sentenced to destruction, God being the ground of all being. So, and of course, earlier, that's what I said, God being ipse unum. That's why it had to diverge into that bit of a cul-de-sac over there earlier on. But I just made my point.
And through eternal destruction, we mean, burn to death for all eternity in a lake of fire.
I don't agree that it's burning to death. You haven't told me on that one.
You're already dead, so you can't burn to death.
There is no physical burning.
Because it is the second death.
It's metaphysical burning, but it's still painful.
Nate,
eternal pain.
How are you doing? How are you doing?
Good.
I think you were catching some of this, I'm hoping?
Yeah, I came in right as Floyd and Shanna decided to convert to the religion of peace.
See, now you got 3 religions. Yeah. I mean 3 theists, because you said you didn't have enough theists before.
So, what is, first off, Nate, what are your thoughts on hell? What are your thoughts on, one of the ideas that Maximus is putting out here is that, because we're trying to get onto the topic of is torture ever compatible with morality? And Maximus's viewpoint on this is that, well, technically it's not torture, it's just torment. And because of that, it's okay. What is your views on hell?
Well, I don't want to commandeer your show, but it could end up taking a while. I personally think it is a literal place that's really going to suck, probably for a long time. I think that's as concise as I can make it.
And is that moral?
I think yes, but that's not going to be a quick answer. I don't see it as, I really think someone's basically going to have to take their self and put them in hell, all the while God saying, look, come here, come here, come here. I think they're really going to have to be hit with a choice, and they're going to really have to consciously decide where you are is not where I want to be. So after that, I would say I would equate that in a natural manner to my own kid. If I'm like, look, I'm always going to love you. I'm never going to kick you out, but I'm not going to chain you to the basement and force you to stay in my house. If you hate me so bad, no matter how much I explain myself and how I try to do things for your benefit and how I love you and I care about you and all this stuff, if I explain that and you're just not buying it, at a certain point, I can't force you. So I'm going to say, look, if you don't want to be where I am, then fine. You're welcome anytime. But if you don't want to be here, I'm not going to make you.
I think that analogy just falls because
God doesn't actually have any participation in our lives, for one thing.
Right. Well, no. The default position of it is you're born going towards hell. You're on the river to hell, like that. You do nothing and you go to hell. You have to do something to not go to hell.
Right.
Where in the analogy you gave, you have to do something to go to hell. Your child has to do something to separate himself from you. Where that's not the default. The default would be the child's already outside, separated from you, and you're trying to say you can come into my house.
Well, technically you already have done something, right? Because, everybody sins.
You're born original because of original sin. You're born with a sinful nature. So this being born, you deserve hell.
Can I just real quick? I was having a conversation with Epi a while ago about the concept of moral failings, and I hope we can talk about that more, somewhere else, some other time. But I think most of us would say that torturing another person would be a moral failing. I mean, would you guys agree that torturing people is a moral failing?
Yes,
I would think so.
Okay, yep. So God can't fail. It's impossible for God to fail at anything. But he tortures. So can we resolve that?
Well, maybe eventually, but I think before we say God tortures, he sucks, and by the way, he doesn't exist, I think we need to consider the rest of the story, right? So for the non-believers, it would be mythology. Nonetheless, consider it. So we're told there is...
I don't think we need to consider the rest of the story, because if you say that torture is okay under certain circumstances, but we just need to know the circumstances, then you're making a consequentialist argument. You're saying torture is okay as long as the circumstances are thus.
No, I'm saying who's actually doing it. Like, this mythology to you is full of countless beings that are free moral agents, and they're very evil, and their whole goal is to basically inflict as much pain and destruction upon humanity as they can, but somehow we skip completely over this large part of the Bible that talks about these evil entities, the devil, these demons, all these things that want nothing more than what you're saying, to lawlessly, immorally torture people to death, but somehow they get a pass because if God somehow is responsible for creating them at some time, then it all gets traced back to him. And I think, maybe
Yeah,
you
he
can
created them. He created them. They're
That's
for
what I'm
his
saying.
purpose.
Maybe you can get back there to indirectly blaming God, but it just seems we completely skip over this whole untold evil entities, and we just go straight to God.
Your God controls them.
They're his tools. It's not indirectly. I mean,
Yeah,
Your
well,
God's in direct control.
technically,
of
he
them,
created
not
all of
indirect.
us
He's
too,
directly
right?
responsible for all of it.
The
So,
only point I made.
He made them to torture people.
even you
sorry,
guys.
guys, 1 second. We're gonna cool this down for a second here. Nate, I want to let you finish your point here, and then I want Trillium, because Trillium hasn't really, I know you're a theist. I don't really know what your view is on this, so I'd like to maybe go into what you think as well. Sorry. So go ahead, Nate.
It's clear why the devil and all these demons get a pass. I can't even finish a sentence about it. So all I'm saying, Floyd, no doubt someone can make a case back to God is evil because of this. But let's talk about this at least. At least entertain this part of the Bible and see if there's anything else there, right? So if you just fold your arms and you're like, God created them, he sucks. I think that's a very closed-minded position. I think we should at least try to dissect this and work our way through it and see if there's anything else to be explored there, because until I mentioned it, nobody else has. So I think to not even talk about it and just go directly well, if God creates people and if God fits this one interpretation, then he's evil, he sucks. I think that's a disservice
God can't
to
control that. God doesn't have the power to control demons.
Floyd, it doesn't matter. That is not the point. Can you just acknowledge what I'm saying? Is this whole?
It doesn't make sense. What you're saying at all doesn't make.
We
no
understand
sense
what
at
you're
all.
saying, but it's not.
So wait, let me understand what you're saying correctly then, guys. So you're saying that God has moral responsibility for other moral agents as well because he created them, no matter good or bad.
What this is about. The devil's not in charge of all this. God made this whole
No,
system.
yes or no? Is God
What about the
responsible
devil?
for evil? Is God responsible for evil moral agents because he created them?
Yes.
Absolutely.
That's okay. Thank you just for clearing that up.
Okay, like I said, Trillium, I want you to weigh in here too. How do you feel about where we've gone so far with this conversation?
I feel you've jumped kind of all overboard.
So do I.
The whole conversation was to be or not talking about everybody's specific concept of hell. So what exactly do you want me to comment on? Because we've kind of been all over the place.
Okay, well, you recognize as a theist, or you're a Christian, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Do you believe in a literal hell?
Yes.
Like fire, brimstone, all that stuff?
Yeah.
Eternal torture? Okay. Great. Do you agree with what Maximus is saying with his interpretation of what hell is?
Yes, I do. That's the one I was raised with, and that's the one that you keep hearing about all the time, drilled into your head.
So not about torture, but just torment. Eternal separation from God is just the only torture that he's ever going to need. There's no need for any extra pain or burning or suffering or anything.
No, I mean, I kind of hear both, because it's like you're getting tortured physically, but you're also being tortured mentally because you're separated from God as well.
I was separated from God, living in Hawaii with an all-you-eat buffet every day. I don't think I would miss God that much.
Hawaii, actually, God is necessary for Hawaii to exist.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
I kind of see.
You think?
At least try to keep the last. We got 10 minutes left on the torture morality aspect of it. On is that ever the case? Is that case ever justified?
I'd really like to hear. I don't know how many other people have questions, but for Nate, I asked Epi earlier, and I wasn't. No offense, or Max, I have no offense. I wasn't satisfied with the answer. But what purpose does hell serve? What purpose does it serve that couldn't be served by simply annihilating people or just some other means?
Maybe that is what it is. Maybe hell could be the equivalent of living on Pluto. If Christians, if not Christians, view hell as the most evil singular place on earth that God tortures people indiscriminately, I think Christians more consider it as we may not have an exact handle on the degree and temperature of hell, or if it's completely dark and light or dark and light at the same time. We may not know the finer points, but I think the one thing Christians focus on is hell is definitely a place God
If
is
there's
not.
I asked
if
what
there's
purpose. I don't know why this is so
that's-
hard. It was hard for Epi too. I asked what purpose it
I
serves.
understand it.
Jeez.
So I think mine.
If there's annihilation, it's the easy way out.
Hang on, Max. Hang on just a second, because I think Benny was trying to clarify with Nate. I think the
They
question.
just don't. They can't answer that question for some reason.
Yeah.
I'm asking, what is the purpose of hell? Why can't? I mean, it doesn't seem to.
I was about to say.
Go ahead.
Okay, the reason why it's there is because it was annihilation. That'd be the easy way out. There'd be no reason for you to stop being an atheist, because if it's annihilation, you just cease to exist anyways. It's like you never knew if there's a God or not. There's no consequence. So even if you're just being evil and saying, you know what, I don't want to listen to God, like even if you knew God did exist and you're just being you didn't want to accept him or nothing. It's like if you just die, you just die. There's no consequence for your actions. Like it's the easy way out. That's why annihilation.
So you see it as
Like
a
I don't see
Wait,
hell as
wait,
fair
wait,
either.
wait.
But annihilation's
Hang on.
definitely not fair.
You see it as a deterrent.
Appropriate
Okay,
response
guys.
is for this God to torture forever for not worshiping and believing. That's the meaning. That's the purpose. Specifically to teach them a lesson. Specifically to hurt them. Specifically because they weren't in a relationship with God.
Like I said, I agree. I don't think there should be a hell, but the fact is that I believe there is, and it actually, I don't know, maybe it's because I was raised, it makes sense.
You don't believe there should be, though. Why don't you think there should
No,
But you don't think
because I honestly don't. I don't think that people should be, tortured forever and ever and ever.
be? So your morality is different than.
To be honest, I don't
think God's
think
morality
those
is.
unique people. I'm one of those unique people that would rather just, when I die, just die. I don't want to spend really anywhere in eternity, to be honest.
Yeah, me too.
But
You should be an
can't
atheist.
change the rules.
If you could choose your beliefs, you could
change
just
the
stop
rules.
believing that stuff.
it's not about changing the
But
rules.
you
This isn't about that. This is about this God's the qualities and the traits of this God being put on trial in a sense, right? It's been presented in some time or capacity that God is X, and we're like, oh really? Well, okay, let's examine that. Doesn't really look like God's X being moral, right? So if if you're told that God's all this and that, and God's also wrathful and vengeful and jealous and angry, and we know that those are the traits that are destructive to us, and we know that those are the traits that we spend most of our lives trying to overcome, then we can call into question the traits that have been given to this God. And if we can call those into question, then we can call that God into question, which means this might not be the rules.
So,
Yeah, it's not a moral thing.
One second,
You
guys.
guys all talk at once.
Yeah, there's a lot of people want to get in. We're gonna go back to the other format. If you guys want to add something in, type something in the side chat. We'll just direct the conversation that way.
Can
Okay. Yeah, Nate, go ahead.
If I could answer Benny, I think the purpose of hell, is kind of biblically explained. It's a place for, eventually the devil and all these evil entities. That's why it was created. I think if that's about as much as it says about the purpose of hell in the Bible. That eventually, that's why it was made. This is specifically for this Lucifer guy and all of his evil entity followers. So the purpose is not for us. Nonetheless, we can find ourselves there. But as for the purpose of hell, I think that's the most answer you're going to get from the Bible. It was created.
Benny, response.
Is the lake of fire in hell?
One second, Xbox. Sorry, Benny, you want to respond to that?
I don't think that makes any sense at all. If the purpose was for the devil and his angels, then he could have made a special place for them only and then done something different with humans. There's no reason to just lump them in to the same. Nate was just talking about how the devil and the angels need this special consideration, that they're so evil and that they're out causing havoc all the time. Well, then why would we get the same punishment as them? I mean, if they're really the cause of all this trouble.
Is it legitimate to torture demons as well? Is it legitimate to torture anyone, regardless of what they did? You say, oh, they're demons, so it's okay to torture demons forever? That's okay?
Let me try it this way. Is there any not taking into consideration heaven or hell, just in regular life, the real world right now, is there any situation where you think that somebody being tormented or tortured for as a punishment for the rest of their life would ever be justifiable?
Never as a punishment.
No.
Yeah, I mean, we have international laws against torture, right?
Yeah, I mean,
we have laws against cruel and unusual punishment, but that's okay with God.
Most modern Western nations reject the death penalty, and the death penalty is infinitely more merciful than keeping someone alive and torturing them.
You know,
I
so-
don't reject the death
can I ask
penalty
a question?
myself, but okay.
yeah, sure. Go ahead, Nate.
To the non-theist, like, if this literal hell torture of hell is true, then you'll probably get a lot of theists who kind of agree with you, and you have a point. But to say this out of any other... Okay, so my question would be, if one day you get to have a one-on-one conversation with this God, and you find out that, let's just say, annihilationism is true, so you can live forever with God if you choose. If you choose not, then you just, like every atheist thinks, you just go poof. Then would you feel like the biggest idiot on earth for all the hours you've trashed this one literal interpretation of hell, only to find out that God actually is completely consistent with your morality, and for those who don't want to live forever or don't believe in him, they just cease?
No, I wouldn't feel
Or
bad
would
at
you
all.
think you were right
Not
and
at all.
justify?
See, that'd be different.
I wouldn't
Yeah,
feel bad at all
not-
because I don't have that evidence right now. And when the
Right.
evidence presents
Exactly.
itself, then I'll change my mind. But right now, with the evidence I have no reason to think that's the case.
Well,
I'm just-
Everything is pointing towards the fire thing.
Well, hang on. That wasn't my
The
question.
epistemic problem.
My question wasn't will you change your mind. My question was what would be going through your head upon receiving evidence that now changes your mind? Like, what would this internal dialogue be like? Would it be like, oh, I wish I wouldn't have been so hard on that, or I'm glad I was because I just now got the evidence? Like, what's the
No,
internal
I'd be
dialogue?
relieved. I'd be relieved. I get to not have an eternity.
And I would say to this, God, why didn't you
Yeah,
reveal
there you
this
go.
information clearer in the first place?
Exactly. True.
All right.
Exactly.
So if I might,
Why are you withholding evidence? Why are you withholding information from us?
can I?
Yeah, go ahead, Max.
Okay. After a lot that's been said here, I'm not sure where to touch on first, but maybe I'll just restate my point on this whole. I don't think hell is eternal torture. I think it's torment because God could avoid this if he because the person who decides to go down this route could avoid it if they so chose to. So I don't think that anybody is in hell just because they didn't believe in the rational thing. I think that people are in hell for having knowledge of that rational thing and still rejecting it despite all the reason there was to believe in it. And furthermore, I also think that eternal separation from God does come about when rejecting having the presence of God as a part of you. As for this notion that, well, God could have prevented it because he created it. God does have restrictions in terms of logic when he does create. When he does create, there is at least going to be things that he takes into consideration that we don't on a much higher epistemic level as well. So, for example, it could be that in a world with enough people to be significant, more than maybe 5 or 6, it would require at the very least some people who choose to deny God and go into eternal torment.
I'm sorry. I have kind of a point of contention with this because you're making it sound like it's my choice, that my beliefs are my choice.
As I've said plenty of times in the past, I do not believe that you go to hell for your decisions. Well, actually, partially it's your decisions. It's also your actions as well. I don't believe that you go to heaven or hell based on what you believe. I believe you go there for being regenerate or not. That's what I put down as this conversation was taking course. So I just don't want to bring this up because everyone keeps insisting that, oh, you have to believe in the right thing. It's not about belief. It is about action. And being
Confess with your
regenerate
mouth
is
and
part.
believe in your heart, you'll be saved. I mean, grace not works. It's
Grace, yeah, it's grace. Grace
Yeah.
is what regenerates you. However, when it comes to having grace, what comes about is a change of belief and a change of what you do and your actions.
It is faith, not of works, that none should boast. I mean, what is that in Peter? I mean, I can find these verses if you want. This is not
None shall
Protestant.
boast.
I know you're mostly I know you've lived most of your life as a Catholic, but this is not Protestant theology. This is, Protestant theology is grace. It's grace theology.
No, first of all, even Catholic theology is grace theology. It's not about soteriology here. When those verses are brought up, one has to remember that grace is what saves you. And with regards to your faith, it's your allegiance to the covenant. It's better if I would implore everyone to read the New Perspective on Paul, mostly done by trained scholars such as N.T. Wright, not to mention what's his name, N.E.P. Sanders. It's faithfulness to the covenant that's being explored in these verses.
Right. So it's not rejecting God. It's being, like you just said, loyal to the new covenant. Accepting this unique theology. So again, the Jew, the Hindu, the Muslim.
Also, the Bible never says who will be damned. All it says is what you must do to be saved. It doesn't therefore infer that this is the only or exclusive way to be saved.
So there's something in between.
There are plenty of Christian theologians who have argued.
It says narrows the path.
Yeah, it does. Where does this say? Romans 10:9. If you declare with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. Romans 10:9. Okay, confess and believe. That's what it says. And this is quoted by preachers across the world every day. Okay. So,
So the problem is a lot of people go on the old perspectives of Paul, which were pretty much instantiated during the Protestant Reformation through very Lutheran eyes, mind you. It's actually not until the New Perspectives of Paul where we explored Paul's Jewish roots and his exploration of the Jewish covenant into the New Covenant, and what he's taken from there, that we've actually found out and better verified that what Paul is referring to and what Paul has always been referring to was the covenant in total, or loyalty, or faithfulness, or trustworthiness, or having a trust to the new covenant. It's not about just this abstract notion of sola fide that was propagated during the Protestant Reformation in the 1600s.
So you're saying Christ dying was not necessary? Christ was not necessary for salvation.
That's not what he's saying. But he is. I mean, it is. It's very strange that it's not much more obvious what a person needs to do to be saved. Because Max has an extensive knowledge of Christian theology from having studied it, and
biblical criticism as well. I'm
invoking
Wright and Sanders here.
Right, but most people who've been Christians don't have anywhere near your education. They wouldn't have had. I mean, they would have needed to know how to be saved, how to avoid hell, and they would have needed to find a way to do that without having access to the kind of education that you have.
And if you want to talk to someone who's lesser educated, feel free to. But I'm here now.
I have talked with those people, and I don't want to talk with them anymore.
Well,
there's a reason why.
I agree with you. I think their position is wrong. Yeah. But we're arguing. But remember, this is a conversation amongst fellow travelers here.
Right.
I like this. I like to think of us as friends, guys.
I know, Shannon.
Well, I think on the whole overall thing, I don't think we've ever established any time torture is just or
unjust, for that matter.
The only case I know that could be made is the consequentialist case. If somebody wants to make that case, that's fine. But it's tricky with God because he has other means of accomplishing the same thing. I mean, with an American CIA operative, you could say, well, this is the only avenue he could take to stop a bomb blowing up New York or something, and then you could say, okay, he did what he had to do. Well, with God always has some other way he could have accomplished the same thing. So it's not necessary.
So the only consequence God can't overcome is a reductio ad absurdum here, or a reduction into absurdity. So, of course, if something collapses into absurdity, then it would also contradict the laws of logic as well.
Well, I don't know. You'd have to show me positively that God would have a problem with that, even.
So you think God can just change the laws of logic right now? So
I have no clue. From my perspective, from my knowledge, from my experience, that'd be impossible. But I don't.
Contradiction. What is the contradiction? I don't see a contradiction between an all-powerful God who can do anything, where he's limited to torturing people.
Yeah, you'd have to show a positive case that God can't do these things, not that I can't do them or that I can't conceive of them.
Oh.
I mean, I guess I feel like we kind of get back on it and we kind of jump off it every once in a while here. But for the topic, I don't think that there's anybody in this room that would agree that they'd want to live in a society that thought that torment or torture for the rest of somebody's life was a suitable punishment. that doesn't seem like anybody in this room would actually agree to. So why do we, kind of bend the rules or change it when we talk about eternal punishment?
Again, I'm not of the opinion that God is torturing. I'm of the opinion that
torture and torment.
Oh well, I think God can lead people to torments.
No, I mean, do you believe that tormenting somebody for the rest of their life is a suitable punishment here?
Do you think so? I would answer that question is, I would say that is God allowing people to be tormented for eternity, so long as unless he has a greater reason not to, morally permissible.
Do you think that people get over their torment? Do you think that it's possible for somebody to feel bad about their things and then go through the acceptable actions to kind of redeem themselves? Okay, yeah, I started off as a really bad person. I did some things that really hurt others, but you know what? I spent the rest of my life trying to make amends of that. And although it doesn't change what I did in the past, at least I have the option to try to make amends for the what I did do.
What if they never feel okay? What if they never feel that they ever deserve forgiveness?
Well, I mean, like I said,
according to theology, they don't deserve forgiveness.
What I'm saying is that
I think you dodged his question.
What I'm saying is that is that do we want people to necessarily be tormented for the rest of their life for their actions, or do we want to encourage a system where people want to do things to redeem themselves to overcome the torment and make right any transgressions that they did before in the past? I mean, which one would you rather have? Would you rather live in a society where we just want people just to be tormented all the time, or a system where people can redeem themselves, try to overcome their torment?
Oh, I would want a society where people can overcome it. I definitely want that.
Right. So in that case, why is it though that we are completely okay and content with the system where in the afterlife there's no option to overcome your torment, to have any option to redeem yourself?
Well, that means that there is another option to consider. Like if for God the only two options are, for example, if for God the only option is to force them into heaven against their will, or leave them in hell to experience torment for all eternity, then those are the only two options being had in that particular instance. We as a society aren't limited by those options. We as a society can have an opportunity to convince people, have an opportunity to change minds. That might, also in terms of us being in their presence to change their minds is also a possibility. God being infinitely good would probably not have that possibility at all. So again, if we're working with a strict dichotomy here, then of course the question is moot.
Well, I don't think it's moot. I'm saying that that when we talk about these ideas like torment or torture, now, if you subscribe to a interpretation of hell of like the fire and brimstone and torture, that obviously people don't want to live in a society now that encourages torture. That's why we pass a lot of laws against that. That's why that the idea of torture for any crime is generally thought of as a negative thing. So people that advocate for torture in the afterlife, it seems like they're holding contradictory views, where they wouldn't want to live in a society where torture was a just punishment here, but you know what? That's okay. In the next life, torture is a just punishment. But in the same sense, even with the torment type thing, is that we don't want to torment people for the rest of their life. We want an option for people to, overcome their past transgressions and, be able to rehabilitate themselves and for the actions that they did. But yet, even in that viewpoint, that you said that you prefer to live in a society that encouraged that, in the afterlife there's no option for rehabilitation, there's no option to redeem yourself. It's just you screwed up there, eternal torment or annihilation or whatever. That's a much better punishment than that's something that we don't accept here.
All right, but if
we don't torture people with fire and sulfur.
If we did have logical limits in terms of why we couldn't have those programs, then yeah, I would understand why we can't rehabilitate people. in the life life we have here. However, in the hereafter, we don't know, and of course I would purport to have argumentation to support me on this one. We would have grounds to say that God would be limited in terms of what He can apply for all eternity. And I did give an argument earlier on in terms of God being the ground of all being. So yeah, what I'm saying isn't really inconsistent here. I think if we had the same, I think in terms of us having the same limits, then yeah, it's a bit different.
But we do have limits. You'd think that God would be limitless. I mean, God can't do. I would say that God couldn't do the logically contradictory. I'd also state furthermore that God could also not. God couldn't do the logically contradictory. I'd also state that we don't have any particular hindrances that of a logical nature that stop us from trying to rehabilitate people. So that would be the distinction to be had. But so if God is infinitely just and infinitely merciful, a system where He allows people to live with torment, but allows people to redeem themselves. This goes back to the point you made earlier, is that those things would not be contradictory with each other. You could be eternally just, or infinitely just, and infinitely merciful by still allowing people to have torment, but have the option to redeem themselves and overcome whatever torment that they had. But that isn't the system that you're advocating here. You're advocating for a system where it's just eternal torment because you feel that people are irredeemable after in the afterlife.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't seem right. I mean, it seems that even if I was to use the argumentation that you had, where earlier we were talking about something being infinitely just and infinitely merciful, that the position of allowing people to have torment, but allowing the people to be redeemed, would be more in line with your theology than just eternity with no chance of any type of redemption.
Guys, all right. Can you repeat that point? I'm also discussing this while having a lot on my mind in not Google Plus lens. So
no, that's fair enough. I accept your conceding to that point. Anyway, so actually, you know what? We are kind of drawing a little bit to the end here. So in about we'll go for another 10 minutes or so, and then after that we'll allow everybody to do kind of like a little closing remarks, and then we'll move on. With Nate, do you want to bring that up in the hangout?
I'd love to.
Sure, go for it.
I find it really hard, right? Because I love participating in this, but when we cross a line into just complete conjecture, like there's stuff that's not in the Bible, it's like, well, can God do this? Can God do that? And it's like, well, God can't do this. Why? Why would you think that? Or God can do this. And then we reduce it down to like our laws of logic as we know them. So I just find it incredibly arrogant on any side to like dogmatically state God cannot do this thing, or God absolutely can do this thing, when as far as we know, the contrary has just as much applicability as the pro position. There's no reason to state one over the other. So it just seems like we should do a lot of I think this, or maybe this, or just withhold judgment until you meet God yourself. Like, I think God is just up there face-palming, like, over and over and over, thinking, I could totally do that thing you say I can't do, dumb Christian, or I totally can't or won't do this thing, you dumb atheist. Like, I'm God, ask me. But instead, we just ask a bunch of other people about this God that some of us believe in.
But why doesn't he correct us now? You're saying he's up there saying, just watching TV and not able to communicate with us. Well, why doesn't he communicate with us and straighten us all out?
Well, why don't you try communicating with him instead of communicating with us to tell you about him?
Well, you say you do it all the time. What is he telling you?
He's telling us your mom sucks.
Actually, this is kind of that was kind of clever.
No, it's not. I'm just being a douche.
I think I understand what you're saying, Nate, and I'm not saying that God can do this or won't do this. What I was saying was that Maximus put out a point earlier about before you joined the hangout about how God is infinitely just and infinitely merciful. But yet I was saying, okay, well that's fine. I mean, he's making judgments on God's character, are attributes of God, by saying that he is infinitely just and infinitely merciful at the same time, and then deposits a system that is not just and merciful, but yet, going off the attributes that Maximus has laid out here, I could propose a system that actually is both just and merciful, but yet it doesn't fall in lines with the theology. And I was just wondering, does that make sense? That's it. I mean, I'm not saying that God can or can't do that. I'm asking that would that make more sense if God could do that, with given the attributes that Maximus has laid out.
So your system would be both just and merciful.
I believe it would be, yeah.
Which position would that be?
That position would be that allowing people to feel torment for their actions, but allowing the option for them to have redemption and overcome it.
Maybe they do.
Well,
maybe they do, but the thing is that would be a more, in my opinion, that would be more in line with the attributes that Maximus laid out for, a God being infinitely just and merciful.
Good comment.
Again, I don't see how torturing people is justice.
Well, so in terms of eternal forgiveness, what if the people can't find it in themselves to forgive them? What if people can't find it within themselves to forgive themselves of their action because of the fact of what they transgressed against, or the nature of what they transgressed against? Maybe what they transgressed against was so just in himself, for anyone to transgress against it would be ipso facto irredeemable to any thinking agent.
Well, I think the problem when you start bringing things like that into play is you're removing it from any recognizable anything relatable. So when you say it's beyond justice or it's above justice, how are we supposed to recognize it, essentially?
How are we supposed to recognize it? Well, there are two ways. You can do it on a rational basis, or you can do it on an empirical basis. If you're considering that we don't see God in an empirical sense, then we go through it in an a priori sense. So we do it through argumentation and the like. Through argumentation, proofs, that sort of thing.
But we're still... How are we removing ourselves from our own limited ways? Because the problem still remains the same. You're saying that God's abilities are beyond or above in some fashion. How do we make the connection? How do we
using rational arguments, proofs, and the like? I mean, it's the same way we know about all other abstract.
But then God's methods. Then what difference? Then in that case, what difference is there between our methods and God's?
Yeah, because it's still limited.
What? Oh, are you asking how does God know things, or are you asking?
No. Well, take any of these situations where you've added on the idea that His ways are more in some fashion, like they're above us in some fashion.
Okay.
When you
That's
say
the only argument.
Sorry?
That's the only argument you really can use when it comes to this. That His ways are more, and
so in terms of understanding why God is more just than we are. So if just to go back to the analogy, just to go back to an example I used earlier of understanding how God exists. God exists as the transcendent cause of all material reality. So any material temporal reality is an effect of God. Now, with regards to that, we also throw in the principle of proportional causality, which is the notion that whatever exists in the creation exists to equal or greater extent in the whatever exists in the effect exists to an equal or greater instance in the cause. So, because there is justice in creation, then there has to be a justice that's equal to or even greater than that. Now, one looks at justice in creation, I don't think there's an easy way to measure how much justice there is, but it's definitely not contained within a few finite moral agents. So that's how we know God is infinitely just.
Well, on that note, guys, Xbox, I believe, will be starting up a after show for this. If anybody wants to continue the discussion, I'm going to call this here. Oh, and damn, Nate left. But I'm going to move on to closing statements now. I apologize. I've actually, I feel like I kind of let it slip a little bit, my duties of moderating this more than I usually do. I was a little more involved than I have been in the past. But we're just going to move on to the last points now. I'm gonna start off actually with the closing statements. I'm gonna give Maximus last word here because he was kind of the main focal point of our discussion today.
It was hell being here.
Yeah. I don't like.
Was it torment or was it torture, Max?
I don't know. Did you guys have an intention to do this to me? Because
yes,
always. Yes,
absolutely.
Oh,
Did it feel like an eternity?
It could have been. If this is what God is like, I can start to see your point, guys.
What if God is one of us?
I personally don't like moral arguments against God. I don't believe in God. I don't and so one of the topics that I was really kind of hoping to address tonight was that that I think that we're all rational, that in the sense that we know that we don't want to live in a society that encourages torture or torment as a punishment, but yet we seem very happy, or the theist seems very happy with positing that as the punishment in the afterlife.
I don't seem very happy with that.
But so because of that, I think it's a contradictory position that we hold. Now, I like the fact that Max and Nate and Trillium recognize that they don't advocate for torture. I mean, I could probably found a dozen theists to come in here and argue for fire pits and burning sulfur and devils prodding people with pitchforks and all that other stuff. But I don't think that that's a coherent view for somebody to have if they don't accept torture as a punishment here. So I mean, it's good to see that that you don't advocate for the torture, that you have to do the work and have a very well thought out position that kind of avoids that torture. But I still don't find it fully coherent. But that's just my opinion on this. On that, but moving on, Alex, do you have any last words for the hangout here?
Yeah, so wish I could have come a bit earlier, but my big problem is when we refer to any attribute, like as I was saying, like with this more justification, because even when we use the tools that we've created to come to these conclusions, we're still only using our own whatever particular attribute it is. So I think to say God has more of this or more of that is vacuous, and that I take great issue with that, and I don't really have anything to say much more on that because it's something we would need to go into. But yeah, and thank you as well.
Okay, Benny.
Yeah.
Oh, Benny, sorry.
Yeah. Hi. Well, somebody said in the side chat, and I agree. It's one of the objections that you could hear for this kind of thing is, well, it's just an argument from emotion or adverse consequences. It's we don't want there to be a hell. We imagine how you would feel being there. Isn't it terrible? And you could say, well, that's not a reasonable argument to make against God. And that's not really the argument against God, but if you talk about that God is also all loving or all just or all merciful or all kind or any of these omni attributes, and you try to say, and he tortures, that's where you've got a problem, is when you try to fit this all together into one being with these contradictory attributes. And another problem that I tried to highlight today was to point out that I don't think hell serves a purpose. I think that whatever purpose is supposed to be served by this place could be served by some other non-torture solution. God he's all-knowing as well as being all-powerful, he should be able to think up something better. I mean, this is not a good solution. And lastly, it's a fear tactic, plain and simple. It's a way to scare people into believing and obeying because you really don't have a choice. It's a sadistic ultimatum. You must do what you're told because God hasn't left you any other option. Pascal's wager is really just a death threat. It's worse than a death threat. It's an infinite torture threat. So, fortunately for us, we don't have any good reason to take it seriously, and we can all do the best to live our lives free of this nonsense. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Floyd.
Yeah, I mean, we often hear from religious people that the claim that if God didn't exist, then everything's permissible. I think if this God exists, then everything's permissible. If this Christian God exists, then torture is good. That eating your children for punishment is good. To having your children suffer, to you suffering, is good. So it seems to me that if this Christian God exists, then everything is permissible as long as this God claims it's permissible. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay, Trillium.
I was just going to say that, well, first of all, just coming in here, drilling in for my friend, that we both feel that the concept of hell is really, it's really psychologically disturbing. I think that's why many of us fail to really be able to justify it in our minds, because we understand, it's being tortured for eternity, and who wants that? And yes, that is an argument from emotions, but at the same time, that does translate to our rational arguments. We try to rationalize the best we can. And I find that nobody, for me, even as a believer, has been able to rationalize it to a point where I can agree, yeah, hell is moral. Because what I was going to bring up was that your title of your hangout was is the hell concept compatible with morality? And I say no, but I still think that it has a purpose. And its purpose is to make sure that you believe. Because if it wasn't there, then you can easily just go on being an atheist and you just die and then nothing happens. Like, oh, cool, no consequences. But this way here, there is consequences. So, it keeps you believing, kind of thing. It keeps you in line. And apparently that's how life sucks. And we all have to keep doing what we do. And that's why I haven't stopped believing yet. I'm gonna admit, I guess I am kind of a backsliding Christian because I don't really agree with too many of the things that are going on with the Christian way of life and what's going on with their right wings and everything, but I still believe, and hell is probably a major contributor to it. So it does have a purpose. I just don't see any morality in it.
All right, Xbox.
Yeah, I wanted to. I'll add on to what Trill just said real quick. Yeah, I don't know, 20 years or so, 15, 20 years. Hell is the only thing that kept me calling myself a Christian. I didn't believe in any of it except for that when I'd get scared or in downtime, it took me that long to shed that notion. But hopefully, if that's the direction you go, hopefully you won't hang on to it for 15 or 20, or you go the other way quicker and not stop worrying about it. But and to Floyd's real quick, I think you said something about you think in a world with God that eating your children as punishment would be permissible. Well, I'd have to put forth. I think that's a good thing. I like eating my children, therefore God, right? But no, I think that even though we didn't stay completely on topic tonight, I thought it was a great conversation and a great. These conversations always lead off into branching conversations that I think add for later topics. And good. I think the concept, Deeper here was saying that the concept of hell, no matter how it was put, even tonight or by some of the fundies, it doesn't come out to a coherent thing when God's involved. So, but I enjoyed it. Hope to see you on the after show.
Maximus, got your last words here.
Okay, I might have a bit to say, but I'll start off where I think it's most necessary. Thaddeus, I have to say that if hell is really what's keeping you as a Christian, then by all means, really rethink your position on that one. If you really believe hell is not just torment, but torture, like God inflicting torture for eternity, then I implore you to look at least at annihilationism, look to universalism. Those are views that I don't accept myself, but are reasonable, in my opinion, with the Christian life. And I'd also implore you to, really rethink the Christian religion if it is putting you in this position. And I'm speaking as a Christian myself. I'm not saying give it up, but what I am saying is if it's getting you to the point where you're accepting God as a moral tyrant, then please, I don't think that's a view God would want for himself. So that's really the most recent thing I wanted to address. The second thing I want to address is if God doesn't exist, everything's permissible. I actually do agree with Floyd, but to an even greater extent. I think if God doesn't exist, nothing is permissible. In that, by mankind setting himself as the highest standard, we elevate humanity to the principle of all things, of all good, wherein that is God's position. And of course, if I'm putting God as the highest standard, then I would not want to transgress against him in the slightest. But when it comes to other human beings, if it comes to what's permissible to transgress against the highest standard, i.e. us, then of course that means there's going to be a whole lot more things we should find just undoable. The third thing is, just to recap my viewpoints, I think if you do end up choosing to separate yourself from God for all of eternity, then I think that whatever comes to you is something that the person is going to be aware of when going through this, and it's something that I don't think God wants for any person. Even Jesus himself says that he wills not for anyone to be destroyed. I'm not sure of the specific verse in question. I should have really looked that up. This is more of a free flow, so if my ideas don't come across as well thought out, then I just ask for your forgiveness, and please just to attribute this to the spontaneity of my of what I'm saying.
1 Timothy 2:4.
Thank you, Floyd. Much appreciated. And with that out of the way, I thank all of you, and I'm very grateful to have the last word.
All right. For Shanna and Nate that had to take off before the end of the show, thank both of them. Thank you both for joining us. If you do end up watching this, I'm thanking you guys for coming. And thanks for everybody that tuned in and watched this. I hope that it was enjoyable. And catch us next week. Have a good night.